Someone in Trouble. Chapter 7. Jumping Through Hoops. The sun shone strongly in Robbie's eyes as he emerged from his lair. The shock of the bright and beautiful day almost made him drop the lid to the silo back on top of his head. Was it too late for him to change his mind and go back down? He skulked through town in his usual manner, sticking close to walls and sneaking around corners. When he reached the sports field, he didn't make himself known right away. Instead, he kept back behind the gate to the court and peeked inside, scoping out the place. The kids were still there, just as Stephanie had said they would be. "I don't know, Pinky," Trixie was saying. "Are you sure about this?" "It'll be fine," Stephanie said. "It's just for one day. How bad could it be?" "Couldn't we call Sportacus just to be safe?" Ziggy asked plaintively. Stephanie's face squinched up a little bit, but she shook her head. "We aren't getting in any trouble, guys. I think we can handle this on our own." Robbie couldn't figure out for sure what they were talking about, and he didn't get any more time to eavesdrop. Stephanie chanced to glance away from her friends and spied Robbie spying on them. She put on a gratuitously wide smile and waved at the villain, hailing him loudly and blowing his cover. "Hey, Robbie, you made it!" The other kids turned and followed Stephanie's gaze, and Robbie jerked down out of sight for a second from force of habit. He quickly got a hold of himself and stood back up, acting as though he'd merely been stretching. The gate scraped loudly as he pushed it open, further ruining his entrance. To his surprise, none of them actually looked all that displeased by his arrival. The Pink Girl's welcoming reception was downright off-putting. "Yes," Robbie said shortly, not quite comfortable with all the kids looking so openly at him. "I did. So what?" He cleared his throat. So what now?" "Well," Stephanie said tentatively, "we were playing horse. Do you want to join?" "I don't see a horse," Robbie said, peering around the basketball court skeptically. "Not a real horse," Trixie snorted. She held up the basketball. "We play the game with this." She thrust the ball at Robbie, and the man took it awkwardly, fumbling with the thing. He craned his head down and gave the ball a suspicious sniff before making a small gagging noise and holding it out at arm's length. "It's sweaty," he said disdainfully. "Come stand over here and shoot some hoops," Trixie said, waving towards the basketball hoop. Robbie shuffled reluctantly over to the free-throw line painted on the court, and the kids moved out of the way to watch him from the sideline. But once there, Robbie didn't know what to do. "How am I supposed to shoot it?" he asked. "I don't see any cannon here." "You don't shoot it like that," Trixie laughed now, and the sound made Robbie start to glower. He hadn't come outside just so the kids could laugh at him over their stupid game. "Just throw it into the net." "First hoops, now nets," Robbie muttered under his breath. He looked at the basketball hoop looming at the end of the lane. "Well, that doesn't look so hard." Clutching the ball tightly between his hands, Robbie cocked his arms back into his chest and bent his knees. Gearing himself up with a wiggle, he sprang up with a forceful grunt and thrust the ball into the air. The basketball soared out of Robbie's hands, and the arc ended only halfway down the key. The rubber reverberation of the ball against the blacktop was the only sound for a moment as everyone watched the toy bounce and roll out of the court, completely bypassing the hoop. "I meant to do that," Robbie declared. He walked stiffly over to where the ball had settled against the wall and stooped down to pick it up. "That was just my warm-up." "Give it another try," Stephanie encouraged the unathletic man. Robbie scowled and grimaced as he straightened back up and found the basketball was even more sweaty now. He stalked back over to the throw line, far less confident in the ease of this game. Robbie tucked in his arms, planting the ball against his chest once more. He bent his knees, gave a preparatory wiggle. Abruptly his back stiffened and he pointed outside of the basketball court with an expression of absolute amazement. "Look!" he shouted. "There's a gorilla over there riding a unicycle!" The kids gasped and boggled, turning as one towards the direction Robbie had indicated. "Where is it?" Trixie asked excitedly. "I can't see it," Ziggy complained. "Wait, is that it?" Behind the backs of the children, Robbie rushed down the free-throw lane and stretched his whole body up, reaching his arms out until he could just pitch the basketball into the net. He scampered back to the throw line, panting and chuckling. "My mistake," he said. "Must have been a bird. Oh, look, I shot the horse." "You what?" Ziggy exclaimed. "The hoop," Robbie corrected himself. "I shot the hoop. See?" The net was still waving from the ball passing through. "That's great, Robbie," Stephanie said. "It is, isn't it?" Robbie agreed. "Now try it from the three-point line," Trixie said. Robbie stopped congratulating himself to give the girl a perplexed squint. "The what?" "Just take a few steps back. There. Now shoot again." "Again?" Robbie's voice cracked with exasperation. Just how long did they expect him to keep at this farce? He could see they were serious by the expectant looks on their faces. Their attentions were totally engaged by this spectacle of Robbie Rotten playing a sport. No gorilla was going to ride in on a unicycle to help him out of this one. He stood only a few steps farther back from the hoop than before, but it made the goal feel like it was miles away now. Robbie's palms felt unpleasantly sweaty on the basketball as he lined up for his next shot. His arms were already a bit sore from his last attempt, and it didn't get any better this time. The ball arched lazily out of his wild throw and fell even shorter of the net than before, bouncing and skidding out of the court. "Robbie's got an H," Trixie said in a sing-song tone. "Too bad." "I don't itch. Who says I do?" Robbie snapped. "An H," Stephanie corrected the villain. "Every time you miss a shot, you get a letter. First an H, then an O, until it spells out horse. That's the game." "Aren't games supposed to be fun?" Robbie grumbled under his breath. Trixie retrieved the basketball and took her place on the free-throw line, and Robbie was more than happy to step down. Waiting for the kids to take all their shots gave him some time to rub his already aching arms and try to breathe out a stitch forming in his ribs. It didn't get any better. Robbie fumbled the ball, pulled a muscle in his back, and missed every shot he threw in his increasingly frustrated thrashings at the net. Couldn't the game have been some smaller animal like cat? But no. Robbie had to sweat it out in the hot sun as each kid went before him making their shots so that he could go up to the next shooting line on the court and foul his own up, painstakingly racking up one penalty letter after the next. At last, Robbie was on his last turn, trying to perform something called a layup. He could barely dribble the ball down the court, puffing and wheezing with sweat running down his face and stinging his eyes. The ball rolled away from him and his back protested with another painful muscle spasm as he bent down to scoop it off the ground for the final part of this maneuver, jumping up under the net to score in the hoop. Robbie was so exhausted he couldn't even jump to get both of his feet off the ground. He flailed his arms and the ball flopped out of his hands, banged off the side of the hoop, and ricocheted back against his head. "That's horse!" Ziggy called. "Game over for you, Robbie." "Good!" Robbie spat. His face had reached a bright shade of red from all the strenuous exercise, as well as the embarrassment for his performance, and he could feel the circular impression the basketball had left on his forehead. "This was a horrible game anyway." "Come on, Robbie, it wasn't that bad," Stephanie said. "Why don't we all play something else?" "Yeah," Trixie said, already gearing up for another game. "Let's do something where we can really run around. How about soccer?" "That's a great idea," Ziggy cheered. "We can have teams of 2. Do you want to be on a team with me, Robbie?" "No!" Robbie blew the word out of his puffing cheeks. "No more games." "Ah, come on," Trixie said. "We barely even played one game. When we play with Sportacus, we do all kinds of sports." "Do I look like that mustachioed blue buffoon?" Robbie snapped. I'm not going to spend all day doing flippity flips and swish bang boos with you kids. I'm tired. All these gross sports are no fun to me. If you don't want to play any sports, what do you like to do for fun? Trixie challenged. That's easy, Robbie said. Take a nap. No, no, Trixie insisted. What do you do for fun with other people? Robbie's eyes squinted into narrow slits as he glared at the pigtailed girl. A couple tense seconds passed before he finally said, I don't. You don't what? Trixie asked. I don't do fun things with other people, he said nastily, spelling it out for her. Why would I want to do anything with other people? They're just noisy and tire me out. I want nothing to do with anyone. The kid stared back at Robbie, slightly stunned by his declaration. He wiped some sweat off his face and stuck his nose up, trying to regain some dignity. Now, if you've all had your fun at my expense, I'll be leaving. And don't any of you dare to get into some sort of trouble and force me to come back up here, or so help me. He didn't give them a chance to argue. With a parting growl, Robbie stormed off of the basketball court as well as his stiff and aching joints would allow. He couldn't get back to his lair soon enough. He would run a bath so hot it would scald the dirt and sweat off of his skin and the memories of this horrible day out of his mind forever. Well, that was a disaster, Trixie said. What a grouch. I didn't know anyone could be that mean and grumpy, Ziggy agreed. Guys, Stephanie said, maybe we're being too hard on Robbie. Are you kidding? Trixie gave Stephanie a look of disbelief. We hardly got to play at all before he refused to do any more. I mean, Stephanie tried to explain, we already knew that Robbie doesn't like playing sports and being active like Sportacus does. I don't think he was having any fun at all. It's not very fair to try to make him do more of those things if he doesn't really like them, is it? But how are we supposed to play with him if he doesn't want to do anything? Ziggy asked and sighed. It's hopeless. We're never going to be friends with Robbie, are we? Just because he doesn't like some of the same things that we do doesn't mean we can't still try to be friends with him, Stephanie said. Maybe there's other things he would like to do that we just haven't thought of. Things that we can try instead of him. Like what? Ziggy asked. I don't know, Stephanie said doubtfully. We're just going to have to think of them.